cousin with an autistic son who passed away a couple of years ago. I have friends. Darlene Pugsley and Mike Pugsley are friends of mine, and anybody who know Luke, and you know what, and just different people over the years. But I'm also the social development critic, and I wanted to get involved in the social development because there are people out there that need services. And this is a group that is terribly underserviced and seems to be cut off when 21 seems to be the number, and then it's and you're SOL kind of is what I would say. I won't say that in the house. I will represent you better than that in the house, better language. But anyway, we do have people that are certainly interested in it, and we know that this is a. I was saying to Nick, I said the word spectrum, as I've done research, and you guys I know far more about all this than I do, but as I've done research, I think the word spectrum is very appropriate because it is such a large spectrum, and it seems to be such a situation where every person is unique with this condition, from the youngest to the oldest in adults, and so we got to fight hard to keep what you have. You guys have done amazing work. The under 5 stuff is world class. It really is. I mean, New Brunswick needs to hang their hat on something. If they need to hang their hat and say, you know what, we're good at something, you've done some amazing work. And from what I have read and what I understand, and all the people I've talked to, it's something else. And when it hits school, they need more because some kids don't find out before they're 5 years old. And so there has to be more there, and there has to be a whole lot more for the adults. And that's what we'll try and present that argument. I don't want to give you false hope that the current government is going to do a whole lot, because they haven't so far taken any of our suggestions. And right now they're mad at me because of the senior situation that I've complained about. But having said that, we'll give it our best fight, and try and educate the public and try and get it in the media. The good thing about this is this spring session or winter session, whatever they call it now, ends up this Thursday, which is when we're going to be debating this. And this will end the session. But we won't have the whole debate finished by the end of this session, it doesn't look like. So I'm excited that it's also going to begin the fall session. In between, we're in our offices doing stuff and meeting with people, and I'll be talking to Harold Moore and Paul and everybody else. And anybody else that wants to chat, I would love to talk to you. Before or after this, before or after the motion. But anyway, I'm kind of excited that the motion is going to finish off this session, and it's also going to start the next session. And that's good. We get almost 2 kicks of the cat here on this one. But anyway, I don't have my business cards on me, and that's terrible, isn't it? Politicians should always have those. Anyway, it's Ernie, E-R-N-I-E, Steeves, S-T-E-E-V-E-S, @gnb.ca. If you want to send me anything that you think that would be pertinent in my speech, because it's my motion, I get 20 minutes off the top. The other MLAs on either side get 15 minutes each, maximum 15 minutes each, and then I get 10 minutes to close it off, and then we vote on the motion. And the motion is to increase adult autism services. Yeah.
Can you give us an example or some flavors of some information that could possibly be?
You know what? Like stories. Like stories. When I talked to my cousin Cynthia Bartlett from St. Stephen, and her life stories with Charlie are great because they have to know. Because people don't know. Because people see Rain Man and think that everybody is a savant. They think, oh, autism. Wow, it's unfortunate that they're nonverbal, but can they play the piano? Or they must be great at math. No kidding. I mean, you guys must face this all the time, but that's what they're thinking. And that's what I want to educate the legislature on, because these people don't know, and they have the power to change it. And this is why it's important to get it in there. They actually have, despite what they say, and yes, the province is broke, there is money available. There's always money available if they'll take it from some other silly things. But this is something that they can link with the federal government on, and New Brunswick could be a real center for something of some sort. I'm starting to reach there.
Do you have any current statistics, where, 50% are, low IQ, and when you help them out, and you
You sent me some of those and I called it to.
And I think those hardcore numbers would get their attention fast to say, hey, Raymond is a movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, we do have a substantial on the lower end of functioning.
Yeah.
Adult use. They will require 724 supervision
Yeah.
and/or care.
Yeah.
In a.
And I have the one in 68 is affected somewhere along this, and yeah, I know, I got all those numbers from Harold and stuff.
Yeah, and break down the budget.
Yeah. The thing is, you also don't want to make it too scientific. You got to be able to appeal to them so they understand. Because some of them have a heart, some of them don't. But some of them do, and you got to.
The numbers that come in here at Sterling can help Sterling.
You know what?
$250,000 a year for
That's
Kelly.
You know what? We have estimates the other day, budget estimates. I get 10 hours of questioning of the social development ministry the other day for budgets. Nobody's growing now. According to social development, there's nobody outside of the province being served, unless it's under the Department of Health. Is it possible it's under the Department of
No,
Health?
it's not. I'm familiar with that one. No.
And
It's social development.
and you still maintain there's somebody that's growing?
I know there used to be trees,
Yeah.
then it was down, I know two are back in the
Yeah.
province, so I don't know if they're still
Okay.
down there or not.
Yeah. And where are the two? I'm sorry, this is kind of in your meeting time. Is that all right? Where are the
They
two?
want to hear you more than they want to hear me.
Tell me they're not in Restigouche. Are they in Restigouche?
One is in Restoration, the other one is in some sort of somewhere.
What about,
And they're adults.
yeah, is there one up in the correctional facility in Miramichi? Because I've heard that.
That was a story.
I don't need names. I'm not looking for names, but is that true?
At
Can
one
anybody?
time, I don't know currently if still,
Yeah.
but was at one time. And there's no way.
That's
Oh,
that's
but,
wrong.
yeah,
I can
I
actually hear that one because that was a young person who was sent to the emergency youth correctional facility, never having been charged with a criminal offense at all. They said that there was nowhere to accommodate his requirements in the province.
Yeah.
He stayed there briefly, and there was a lot of protests and coverage by the Toronto media. And that person, I believe, was one of the ones that was sent to Spurwink after a period of time.
So he's not back in Miramichi or anything, though?
No, he's moved on from there.
See, that's
But
what
there
I
are,
think about.
excuse me,
Yeah.
but there are youth young adults, Asperger kids
Mhm.
that are out at the youth prison currently right now.
Not getting any services, not getting
I have
any.
no idea, you're not privy to any of that.
No, and it's hard to. It's hard to find out from government without an RTI, and even they have the right to inform information. It takes months, and
But
this whole
often
months.
they're being charged
Yeah.
for behavior that is beyond their
Exactly.
comprehension and
That
control.
needs to be addressed. Yeah, it needs
So,
to be.
I mean, it's-
Yeah.
There's been stats also reported that there are some, obviously in group homes, but also in nursing homes. I wonder if we can find out more about that and talk about that, because if we can make this more of a, not just autism related, but this is going to help New Brunswick as a whole.
Well, you can focus on autism, I'm sorry.
Well, no, but I mean in the sense of if we get these people out of nursing homes and group homes, you're opening up beds in
Oh, I
group,
see what you mean, yeah.
for senior citizens and then opening up and dealing with the hospital.
I know there is one adult, female adult with autism that has been moving up to the COVID nursing home. There's one there for sure.
The other place has been is in general hospital wards in the province.
What's that?
There have been adult autistic living in general hospital wards in New Brunswick as well. I specifically received an email a few years ago from a person whose adult son was living on a ward in St. John Hospital.
Severely autistic?
Yeah. So that's what happens, is they put them wherever they can find a place for them of some sort.
And the parents are happy that they are being provided something, like as a
But are they being
senior.
provided, yeah, but they're not being provided treatment. They're being
No,
provided
but
drugs, right?
When you think about, okay, I'm almost 60, my son is 31. I'm aging, he's getting no support, so I'm going to become a burden on the senior because I'm having him live with me. And so it's because they're adults, they're affecting more than just themselves, they're affecting their senior parents.
And
And that is going to become another huge burden.
yeah, well, I agree.
That's why the parents are accepting.
Whatever they can get. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not just right out here in the school system. A lot of parents are just, they beat down the wall, up, kids go to school, whatever happens in school is better than.
It's respite.
Yeah, it is.
In the, next week is a time fairly organized, and you're saying the debate isn't going to be over next week, but help any of the representation from the Autism community at the House in September, just sitting in where you would acknowledge.
Oh, yeah, if you want to come to the gallery,
I'm
that'd be
just
great.
curious if that's something that could be organized.
If anybody's in Fredericton and want to come to the gallery, it's Thursday afternoon, probably, I think probably before 31.
Yeah, I'm going in this week.
No, it shouldn't, unless something changes with the schedule, and it's hard to know, because the Liberals go minute to minute, hour to hour, things seem to change. We used to have schedules for months in advance, now we don't even know a week in advance. And we had the AGM last night and today, that's the meetings we have. And this week alone, the end of the session has gone from, it's going to be Tuesday, to no Wednesday, no Thursday, Friday, and maybe part of next week, and then it went back to Thursday again, that's where we are right now. And on Thursday, we have to do a couple of votes before we get to debating this. But I'm going to try and get them stalled as long as we can, and maybe ask for standing motions and things, because then we will be able to finish it off and start it up again. Yeah,
Hi, you guys were just talking about how parents are just taking what they can get. And I know that there was a recent thing, I think about a year ago, they had a study on parents, and they actually went in at the end of the day and monitored to see the stress level. And one day they found the hormone levels were so low that they were actually as low as combat soldiers.
really.
Yeah, that's an actual truth if you actually look at legitimate. And that's what these parents are under. You have to understand that the parents are the caregivers. And one of the kids support and stuff, you know what I mean? They
Justify that, eh?
as well. And if we have the same stuff with combat soldier, how are we going to be able to locate? Like they don't even, and that's really important. So,
You have a copy of the proposal that.
Is there next month?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That Harold and Shirley put, or that Bernard and Shirley put together?
No, that's what we got.
That's a different matter.
Okay. This is the one that Paul did then?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I have that too. Oh, I got a lot of literature that I've gone through on that.
Because there's a nice model over in Norway, over in Conway.
It is, but
And
now, but I've also heard people saying there are some problems with that too. Anyway, but I mean, nothing's going to be perfect.
no, but my area of professional practice.
Okay.
And I read the book, this scenario,
Yeah.
like that, to transfer to adult autism, wonderful, multi-level, all the different types of level of care that are coming going, and, so there's nice options, and we have some real good things to build on it.
Yeah. We do.
We just have to tease them out, and, some of us know where to start teasing, but we need to have the will, and we need to have the commitment.
Yeah.
Because you're going to die, we're going to age up and die.
Except me.
I need to know that at some point in time, Justin will need to go to a place where it's a home type environment, and he's secure in his environment, and he's getting structure, and he's getting community support that he has.
And that's what
Are trained people that know
That's
what they're doing.
the motion is supposed to end up, that's what we're looking for. And inclusion is great, but inclusion can't work 100% of the time. And and that's part of the battle I have within my own caucus, is there's people in there that are very, very pro-inclusion. But yeah, I'm just nodding and smiling,
In the detriment of what's best.
Yeah, but it doesn't, you can't say it's gonna work 100% of the time. Nothing works.
It's a buzzword. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a buzzword.
You have to look at
It's
the individual,
nice.
and you have to cater their needs and live in the proper environment according to their individual needs.
Yes.
But you need to have a recipe and some services to offer to change it all up for each one.
The proof that the community philosophy doesn't work is all around us. We hit on several of the models and evidence of it right in our brief discussion today. We've got people like my son who is severely autistic. He's at the current end of the spectrum, who have been living up at the rescue facility in Hamilton. That's a fact. I've been there more than once as a lawyer.
I asked for another tour of that today, so.
Autism Advocate. So that's where we sent them. We sent them to Spearwink, whether they're getting it or not. Because we're living on general hospital wards. The evidence is, and there's no question about it, the community isn't a resource that we provide for the most severely affected by autism. I challenged And I will challenge any day, anytime, anybody in any political party to come and debate me face-to-face on that specific issue, evidence-based approach. And it won't happen, the debate won't take place, because nobody out there seriously thinks they can win that debate. Because the evidence against it is too strong. If you take an evidence approach to what's needed, it's overwhelming that we need a facility of some type, as Don Doherty has already suggested. One that can also provide the expertise and oversight to help those who can function in more community-based group home type of facility and so forth, a network. And we've had Paul McDonald, who knows as much about autism as anybody in this province. He's described that in that paper. And he also talked about it 5 years ago during the previous election campaign. And it was on the CBC website for a while. And I still have a copy of it. We need a network based with a center and group homes.
Yeah.
That's all. It's not real mind-boggling.
And I think something like this, for me, my daughter is obviously on the other end of the spectrum. She is higher functioning, which has its own challenges as we're going through the school system in terms of getting her help or getting her access to mental health services because she has high anxiety. And we can't get access to government-funded mental health services. We're paying for Paul out of pocket lots of money because our only option is for her to be referred to a psychiatrist or nothing. But a center like this, as she grows up, once she, currently she gets some access to an EA, but our hope is that she can go to post-secondary. But what support is available? A center like this could use a model that would provide additional services on an outpatient basis to adults who are going through post-secondary or help them try and find job placements in the community. Something like this excellent center could do, of autism, could do so much for the entire spectrum. It could provide something for those who cannot care for themselves, and it could provide additional services for those who could become functioning members of the community but need a little extra support.
Yeah, Mr. Steeves, in your own pockets, you're going to find, like you said, all these community people that want for you.
Yep.
But the reality is there are human beings that are citizens of New Brunswick and of this province that need 724 nursing home advanced level high-end care. I'm talking level 4. The numbers are not high, but they need a place to live.
Yep.
So going forward, yes, we need things for the justice of the world, that we can go back and forth, but we need it for the cottage of the world. And they exist. And
Yeah, and they can't exist.
It's not woman funded.
Yep.
People don't want to talk about them. The Association of Community People like this want to fluff it all up, but they're there. And I'm going to go to the front line and say, get your head over the sand. I'm advocating for these people.
Yeah, there has to be a different level because right now,
We need a level
when you're gone,
And we don't
restitution is the
use
answer.
facilities, but that's what it's needed.
Yeah, restitution and medication is the answer.
And we can put
And
that
it's
in
not
a
debated.
gated concept.
You can't let somebody live the rest of their lives in a facility in a drug-induced haze.
And we can,
That is
and we can
key.
have these people that require a high level of care within a gated community. One that the public can come and go, our side can come and go, but there would be a building there that would be a secure environment for them.
Yep.
Not just inside walls, but also out in the courtyard and
Yep.
it would be a gated
And
community.
programs that go with them while they're living there,
And
absolutely.
support would be
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
But don't forget those, as you hear all the wonderful, the higher functioning and mid functioning, don't
Mhm.
forget those ones that require 724, because they're the ones that cost money.
And that's what this motion is meant to do. I mean, by the time higher functioning hits 21, then things are going to be hopefully rolling in a good, positive manner.
Exactly.
By the time other less,
19-year-old son.
by the time a nonverbal and everything hits 21,
Very excited, yes, exactly.
Who needs 24/7?
yeah.
These ones need 724 care, they need ADLs, IADLs, they are dependent on
Yep.
people.
No, I agree.
The other reality that we don't talk about much is this. We've already proven we can do this. The early intervention model, as you talked about briefly earlier, it has been recognized by American authorities, the Association for Science and Autism Treatment, David Celebrity, and Dr. Eric Larson as well, who both of them contributed to some of this program development and running, have recognized it as as you say, is a world-class model.
Yeah, it really
Brunswick has done something in which it has excelled.
When you have somebody moving down here from Toronto, that was in the, what was that, a month ago in the transcript? They moved down to Toronto.
And I've
This
received
team in Brunswick, there's
inquiries.
not too many people moving anywhere into the Brunswick.
I've received further inquiries from Toronto, although I advised the person not to come
Was there any?
because her son was already 5 years of age. And I advised her not to make the move from Toronto for that reason. I've lived in the Toronto area, so I know the cost of leaving Toronto as well as living there.
And that 5 year, why did they pick the 5 years?
Well, that was based historically, in part, I believe, because the early MOVAS studies were 2 to 5, and there was clear, overwhelming evidence of the benefits of specific applied behavior analysis treatment. That was, I believe, the reason for the MOVAS studies were based on 2 to 5. Since then,
Okay.
Because when we have that child, 5, 6, 7 years old, the explainability that you have of your cerebellum to take in information, process it, and learn from it, that starts to harden up.
Well, then it's
but
gonna
there are
be.
still studies coming out, though, that Don, there are still studies showing benefits throughout life cycle.
It
in
is.
adulthood. The May Institute in the United States, which is also a major ABA and autism facility, has done a recent sort of review of the study literature. And the studies still indicate the ongoing benefit throughout the lifespan for treatment processes.
Yes, and you also can't really then promote inclusiveness in the school system because a program like this requires 20 hours of therapy a week. So where is that delivered once the kids are in school? You would have to pull them out of the class, which means you're going against the inclusive model.
They will do an extension though. Like we moved from Ontario when our son was 4.5 for the services, and they extended his services to age 6.
Good.
But once he hit school, then it's like garbage. It's like nothing.
You can get autism trained, the same level of training for an A, but there's not as many, it's not the same level.
Yeah.
But my son, I did it through the human rights process. I filed a human rights complaint, and I would certainly recommend anybody who's really fighting hard on that issue, go to the Human Rights Commission, and they'll probably try to poo-poo if I use that expression. But they didn't do that to me, and my son has had an autism-trained TA. He's now in his first extended year from high school, so he did get it from grade 3 forward to that point. And you can also do education after fields to argue for it as well. And all I'm saying is they've been developing the early intervention program has been worked on for the last several years, including by Dr. Eric Larson himself. So you should really be pushing it forward formally is my recommendation. Put it in writing, email form rather than verbal, for example, and make sure there's a clear record of the request for it. And when the denial comes in, take it to the Human Rights Commission, because other people are getting it for their kids. And that's the basis for an argument of discrimination. So I'm just giving you that as a lawyer and somebody who's done it for his son on that basis. It doesn't necessarily mean it'll work for everybody, but it's worth a shot if you're still interested in pushing for it.
I know that they.
Well, sorry for interrupting people, but I know Mr. Steeves has been here much longer than I'm just going to take a quick shot there.
Oh, really?
I have a blog too.
Is there gonna be a dartboard somewhere?
This is live broadcasting over GoToMeeting right now.
Yeah. Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know where this camera is though. All right.
I'd like to thank Mr. Steeves for coming out here today.
Yeah. Ernie.Steeves at Gmail or at gnb.ca. Anyway, if you want to send me anything you got, that I can work into it.
If you come to any future meetings, you've probably already learned it's hard to get a word on it.
Yeah.
Just because we're parents and we care very, very much about what's going on for the most part, that's for the composition. And we get some help and guidance from people like Ricky too. I always like to recognize too. Valerie, I forgot your son's name. I apologize. Ben. Hi, Ben.
All right. I want
Thank you very
to.
much.
Okay, thank you.
Well, maybe till we get something, but we'll try.
You try, all right?
So I guess we're still gonna have a meeting here. Personally, I was very much hoping to see Mr. Steeves show up, and I'm very, very thrilled that he did. I remember I said when I was talking earlier, in my view, that was a historic moment. Mr. Steeves put his motion in to debate it. And I recognize that Mr. Kuhn has tabled the petition too, Rebecca. That's also an important moment. To have an actual discussion in a meaningful way about autism, and particularly adult autism care in the New Brunswick legislature. I mean, some of us have been around doing this for a while, and people get tired of hearing it, including newcomers who've done some really good work like Rebecca over here. But we're just relating our experiences. That's what we're trying to do. And I'm very thrilled to see this motion being put forward by Mr. Steeves. I hope that in the legislature it's discussed in a nonpartisan manner by the parties, because I know there's people with genuine interest in autism in all the parties. Certainly the NDP have been genuinely interested. Their election platform specifically addressed this issue and specifically endorsed the autism network approach that we've discussed briefly here today that has been articulated by Paul McDonald over the last several years. And Mr. Kuhn of the Green Party has also spoken on favorably on adult autism services and has filed Rebecca Atkinson's petition. So there's people in the different parties. I'm sure there's people in the Liberal Party as well, even if they can't say so right at the moment because they're part of the governing party. But I'm very sure that there are people of good conscience in all parties. And we have to keep that in mind and try to approach it in that basis that we can't get angry, we can't get cynical, even if it looks like there's good cause to. We have to work on the basis and the assumption that there's good people in government that we can appeal to. Otherwise, we're giving up. That's my humble opinion. I'm just expressing it. As many times I would like to get a bit chippy on occasion, and people accuse me of it on occasion. But I know we have to keep looking for the best in people in government and so forth. We see it in our daily lives. My son also suffers from the seizure activity, which is much higher amongst people with autism than the general population. Approximately 30% by the figures I've read of people with autism also suffer from seizures. And when he suffered a seizure a couple of months ago crossing the street in North Fredericton, Main Street, two different people came from different directions to assist his mom in helping him to safety. They just dropped everything they were doing and got him to safety immediately. And sorry. It shows there's good people over there. It's not just Fredericton for sure, although Fredericton's a good spot, but I'm sure it's everywhere in New Brunswick. And we have to keep appealing to the good people of this province of New Brunswick. I would like to go over adult care again just to start the discussion amongst ourselves, even though we just covered quite a bit of ground, I think, with Mr. Steeves. The reality is, and I know there's people that have been here more than once now who get tired of the history lesson approach, and I apologize for that, but it's necessary to maintain our institutional memory. I mean institutional in an abstract sense, because I know institutions have a bad word in New Brunswick. Any organization, any association has to maintain a memory of their history. What has gone before, so that we understand where we are now and what we can do in the future, what we have to do to get it done. And our early autism intervention program is recognized in the way that we discussed with Mr. Steeves. And anybody who questions that is quite free to send me an email or send me a message on Facebook, and I'll be happy to send them to the articles that say that. I'm talking about papers written by the Association for Science for Autism Treatment in the United States, more than one, which have said that New Brunswick is a model for Canadian jurisdictions and many American jurisdictions when it comes to early intervention. And we did it in 2 official languages, So we didn't get stuck in any of the debates. I'm not criticizing either language group at all. Ce n'est pas un problème que je veux raser ici. C'est juste que ce n'était pas un problème pour l'autisme des années très jeunes. We developed an early program in both official languages. Parent advocacy created the momentum. We did it through advocacy to get the push to get it done. But it was the people, the professionals, the academics at UNV that put the program together. They created this program in 2 languages. They did it despite the reluctance of the Université de Moncton to participate. They brought people in from Quebec. And I know that because I was sitting at the organizational table where these decisions were made, back when they were made. They put the program together. They've refined it constantly over the years, and it's been basically, I'll use the words taken over by the Department of Education, who claimed that it was essentially theirs to begin with because it was largely funded by the Department of Education. The bottom line, though, is you still have 2 streams originating with that same model.
Sorry to jump in there for a second, Harold. I think those of us who've recently had kids going through, we can say it definitely is a fantastic model. But I think the one thing we have to be careful about is it really differs where you live in terms of the kind of services that you get. The way that it's been set up, each of the 6 centers are run like a business. So it's up to each of those centers to determine how they pay their staff, what they pay their staff. Do they provide them sick days, snow days, vacation days? Right. And that in some areas, and even the kind of therapy that is offered, whether you get in-home, at daycare, or just group therapy at a center, that differs by center, by center, by center. And that inconsistency is a bit of a challenge, something that I think we can improve upon to make it that wonderful standardize across New Brunswick. Because if you're in Fredericton, I believe we got some of the best care possible and the best therapy possible. I know from some of the other parents in other areas, they don't feel, and they didn't get similar services that we got in Fredericton. And when some of the centers are taking more of a profit than others and paying their staff less or giving them less vacation days, your staff turnover is really high. You can't deliver consistent services that 20 hours when you have that kind of turnover.
I don't question anything you're saying. I think a lot of those issues came out within the last year, in fact, and became a matter of great controversy. And there's no question in my mind whatsoever that it varies across the province. And I'm actually not surprised that it happened that way. And the reasons, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons, but one of them is the big push for the early intervention program happened here in Fredericton and Miramichi and St. John to some extent. Moncton also had some really strong contributors as well. But by and large, there were areas of the province where a lot of people just weren't all that involved or interested in it. And that's a fact. But I don't want to get bogged down in it either. I agree with what you're saying, and there needs to be a constant improvement, no question about it. We also made a push to have that brought into the school system, and that was done using a variety of tactics, some of which were bordered on political bribery, perhaps, but in the sense of pushing politicians that it might be in their best interest to do things in certain ways. The bottom line, though, is there is, in theory, there's a program which has been refined even further for ABA in the school system, and we have had at least 700 TAs trained over the years at the UNBCL program, although I assume retirements hit some. There's also many obstacles in that system, including the union agreement, which I'm a labor lawyer by background, and there's no need to have the kind of provision for seniority rights that our QB 2745 collective agreements have had. I have nothing but tremendous gratitude and appreciation for the teacher aides who have worked with my son, but their union as an organization has pushed a view of seniority, which has on many occasions put untrained senior education aides in place to work with autistic children instead of an aide with less seniority but has the autism training. That kind of decision has occurred. And I know it's occurred. And that's not necessary as part of labor law or labor relations or negotiations. It's poor negotiating by our government on that issue. I can tell you word for word what that kind of seniority provision typically entails under the major textbooks and case law in Canada. And they typically involve a combination of qualifications, experience, and seniority. And depending on the type of work involved, one or the other will be emphasized more. Given the nature of the work involved in this case, qualifications and experience should be emphasized more than seniority. End of story. Based on 33 years of labor law, including time spent with the Town Labor Relations Board.
I'm actually from the Woodstock area, and my friend in ABA, by the way, huge thank you. It was tremendous. Helped a lot. Was very, very fortunate. Probably what you mentioned actually is perfect about how, like, in some areas great and in some areas kind of lacking. The model is not lacking. The model is phenomenal. The problem that we're having in our area is the way that it's run in the country for workers is that actually have families have people out of ABA because and have progressed so significantly because the workers that are coming in are missing days and not going in or they're on their cell phones and people are actually complaining to the guys and they're just like, oh well, whatever. And they're not doing what they're not following the model, like they're not helping the parents. So what they're actually bringing people that are friends with the other parents. It's really very chaotic. And I went into my pediatrician and he's a psychologist and he mentioned it, but the regression for him being in ABA asked if I should have had a problem. And it's very common that people from the Woodstock area are actually commenting on this and that the service in the Woodstock area is extortionate. And my pediatrician, Dr. Swami, was like, we were not the first person that's told me that every
Because the Dr. Swami has his hands tied. He can't put it in his very well, I have to go and make sure.
Can you send me an email on that and set that information out in an email?
Absolutely. And like Swami's actually called them and he's phenomenal. Like he'll go and
As a social worker, he needs to go to the supervisor. Okay, he needs to look into the program and he copy the supervisor, children's special needs unit. And that can tag the person who
The other aspect is to take it to the top level of the department.
Yeah.
If you want to send me an email, I'll try to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, we can send Jeff Donater would be the person to
I
talk
know
to.
Jeff.
Yeah,
Very well.
I know him well too.
And he'll listen. He'll give me at least an audience because he has always.
Yeah, he reaches out to us. He has us post a bunch of stuff for all of the earlier intervention and the meetings and the changes. He had us post surveys and things on our.
Very open.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's just one example though, and
Yeah,
that's.
I just want to make sure I get this clear. So will you send me an email on that point? Excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Will you send me an email setting that information up? And will you give me permission to advance those issues on your behalf? Because I'll do that. Okay.
And perfect. And Harold, that's just sort of one example. And I think that's what we were talking about. If you don't live in the Fredericton area,
Yeah.
there are a lot of examples that came out where it is very similar to that, whether it's Woodstock, there was some in St. John. There's a lot of problems with how the individual centers are run because they're run like a business and there's no government oversight or standardization.
Well, the government oversight issue is certainly an important one to bring forward. The other issue, there are other issues there, I think. And I don't want to get into all the past history stuff again, but the reality is even when we were advocating for ABA, early intervention ABA services delivered by professionals, we received a lot of hostility from some other parents who didn't feel that ABA was the way they wanted their kid to go. And so the acceptance of an evidence-based approach, which is what we relied on in order to get services put in place, because if you're just going with stuff that's somebody came up with a theory while they were visiting with their cousins or whatever, that's not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it if it's a paper somebody wrote in a university setting without doing any testing. The amount of studies that have been done in ABA is just off the charts. They've been doing it for, well, when we started advocating, they've been doing it for 30 years. There have been recommendations by the United States Surgeon General to push for ABA treatment for autistic kids. Since then, there's been dozens and dozens and dozens of major studies all confirming it as the single most important evidence-based intervention for autistic kids. However, we did receive a lot of opposition. There were core groups of opposition in certain areas, and it's my belief, at least, that that has affected the extent to which proper early intervention has been put in place, implemented, and supervised. Because there were some areas of the province where the diagnosis of autism wasn't even accepted as a diagnosis. They tended to be up on the northern border near Quebec, where they had other diagnoses that were advocated more, and I don't understand why. I don't pretend to understand why. It's over my pay grade to try and analyze that. All I know is that historically, they did push other diagnoses in lieu of an autism disorder diagnosis. So there's a lot of factors involved in addition to the very important ones you mentioned. I would like to move on from early education and education to the core issues we're starting with today, which is adult care.
Could we take a quick moment though, because we did get I know I had a lot of questions. Can you back up for a second?
Well, can I just say this though? The way we were going to organize it, people asked for an agenda, which I always hate doing things in an organized fashion, to be honest with you, but people were pushing for an agenda. And we said we would address the adult care first and then come back and do the important update information and issues in early education.
Yeah, sorry, this isn't about early education. I was going to say, could we back up and talk? We had a lot of questions. You and I were chatting about it at the walk with regards to ASNB as a whole and affiliated, and is it affiliated with Autism Society?
That was to be the last hour of the meeting.
Okay.
And I did put that agenda on the ASNB website. So if that's okay, I'd rather get right into adult care. And another reason I want to get right into the adult care is because it's been so hard historically to do it. Historically, we had to deal with the early intervention, and there was a lot of challenges. But in my own opinion, at least, there were people in government who were receptive to what we were saying. And we had face-to-face discussions. I certainly did. Some of those face-to-face discussions took place while we were holding signs outside the legislature and places like that. But face-to-face discussions with people like Sean Graham and Bernard Lord, both of whom, in my humble opinion, I'm not a partisan political person. I want to support any party that will help autism. That's my only political allegiance right then and there, not say it point blank. And Bernard Lord and Sean Graham were both very receptive and did help put the early autism intervention together that we have in this province, and to start training autism aides as well. So I hope that doesn't offend anybody's partisan political views, but those are the facts, and we weren't always enthusiastically received when we had our discussions. I had one occasion where I happened to be protesting outside of the meeting that was taking place for Keith Ashfield when he was running as a provincial MLA, and I had my son Connor with me at the time, and Mr. Lord came walking up the sidewalk and asked who he was, and I talked to him about autism, Connor, and he was very nice. He was a gentleman, and he actually did implement some positive. It wasn't just because of that meeting, but it was a reflection, I think, of his character and Mr. Graham's character in addressing these issues. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to elevate either of the status. And I know that in the NDP that Mr. Carty has been outstanding in meeting with us and giving careful consideration to our platform, which included adult care issues in a meaningful way. Mr. Kuhn we've met with, as have you, Rebecca, and there's no question that he is very helpful in that regard as well. But overall, on adult care, it's been almost impossible to get anything sensible done. And my own humble opinion is that it's not about the money. It's not because of money that we didn't get adult care in place in this province in a sensible way. It's because of the strong belief, and I'm not trying to attack people's beliefs. There's many people that have done good things in this province, and I acknowledge it, by adhering to a philosophy of whatever it means of community and inclusion. And I get that. I understand it. I don't want my son sent off to Siberia. I also don't want him sent off to northern New Brunswick to live his adult life Campbell, no offense to Northern New Brunswick, but I've been there several times as an autism advocate and lawyer to Campbellton. It's a long drive from Fredericton, let alone St. John or Moncton. And it's far away, and they don't have any expertise in autism, I know that. So the whole point, though, is that adult care, it doesn't happen for a reason. The reason is every time there's a discussion on autism in the legislature, and I think that was alluded to by Mr. Steeves, any public setting, we always hear somebody stand up and say, oh no, we want a community solution. We want a community solution. Let's include everybody. Well, when have they done this for adult autistics with severe autism? They haven't done it. Where's the evidence that just repeating the words community and inclusion over and over for years? My son's 19. I've been taking on those issues for 17 years, including adult care. And every time I do, people stand up and say, community inclusion. I didn't want to offend Mr. Steeves, who was here today, but there's members of his party, and I'm going to name names. Jody Carr, Jack Carr, Jeff Carr. I'm not trying to pick on them, but the reality is they will advocate every time by standing up and saying, we want a community solution. We want to include people. But at the same time, they will look the other way, just like they're looking this way right now. They'll turn their back on the evidence. The evidence is sitting up, the evidence is living up in the Restigouche Psychiatric Hospital. That's where they live.
How can we get them to understand that what they perceive as community inclusion is actually not inclusion? Because even the ones that don't have autism but are living in group homes have intellectual disabilities otherwise. Where do you see them? You see them congregating as a group. They expect to see them at the mall on Friday when they have pay. They expect to see them at the bowling alley. But do you see them included in community? I don't.
No. It's a big myth.
Right.
That's what it is. It's a myth. The problem is it's a myth that's used to prevent decent adult care services from being developed for people like my son and many others on the severe end of the autism spectrum, and to improving the facilities that have been started with respect to people further along the spectrum. We need people who understand autism and know how to interact and deal with the issues and challenges of autism. We need them in the homes, the group homes too, for all levels. And I've talked a lot about my son's severe autism. As a lawyer, I've gone to the Restigouche Hospital to advocate on behalf of a young man with Asperger's who spent 4.5 of the previous 5 years living in the Restigouche Psychiatric Hospital. He'd been sent there on a minor, and I'm a lawyer for 33 years. This was a minor assault charge for which he was sent for an assessment in Campbellton at the Restigouche Psychiatric Hospital. 4.5 years later, he was being given some accommodation in an apartment with supervision, but overall, he had spent 4.5 out of 5 years there, and he wanted out. And they didn't want to let him out. And my role under the review board processes under mental health legislation was to assist him in getting out of Campbellton finally. That's the kind of solution that the community philosophy of ignoring the evidence has resulted in. That's it exactly. And all it does is ignore the truth. It hides the truth. And I will refuse, and I will always refuse to stand silently while people pretend that my son is going to have a good life under this community philosophy, because he won't. He will end up in Restigouche if he's lucky. If he's lucky, he will end up in Restigouche under the current system. And that's not the luck I want him to have. We've developed capable autistic expertise in early intervention. We've expanded into the school system. We've become a model at something. This province can be about more than cutting down trees and digging up rocks. We've proven it. There's no good reason to stop progress on autism, to stop moving it into the adult care.
And I think what we need to do is get the public to care more, which is where I brought up earlier about the tying it to the senior citizens in the hospitals, because unless you are affected, why do you care? in order to make it more for the government to care and the government to realize they have to do something, they need more than us standing there saying, hey, we need this. They need the entire, this is where community comes into play, not the approach that you're talking about. I agree that community approach doesn't work. The community approach we need is the community to stand up as a whole and say, we need something better, we need something different that will have a rippling effect on New Brunswick as a whole. We're going to help those who are autistic. You are going to create jobs.
That's not how it works. This isn't working. This isn't going to go. The only people that are going to get applied is the people that are in the home and close connections.
Tying to the senior citizens that are in the hospital, like our ALCs waiting for their children, is very slippery slope. Because the number of adults that are in hospitals are very low with autism. I would not go that route whatsoever. What I would suggest though is, and Harold and I were part of the meeting with Dr. Terry Kennedy not that long ago, and like everything else, one of the suggestions was, is there someone out there that can set up a residential place to start as a model? And so they say, listen, we have this small residence with 2 or 3 people there, and it's working. We need to expand on that. We also, but tying it and trying to get into the other aspect of tying it to seniors in the hospital, I wouldn't go down that road whatsoever. That's a very dangerous slippery slope. The government's going to throw it right back in our face.
I'm not sure either about just working on a small model, Don, with all
We
respect.
had something though, but that was just one of the
Yeah.
questions is we have to bring forward something that's there, because what's needed is, and it is a facility or residential care, whatever you want to call it, would be a nursing level or scope of practice for adults with autism, but within that campus, if you like, there would be a place where the higher functioning adults can come and go to their work. There would be assisted living apartments in there. There would be individual living apartments in there. It's a gated community. The public would come and go. There would be venues that are there. But at the same time, those of the others, of the world would be there in a 7/24 supervised environment. We need that setup.
And I agree with all the principles that you're espousing. I don't believe for one second though they could do that with a small model. With all respect,
I think we know what we want and what we need. I think we also know how to go about getting it because we already did it.
We have to be straight with our story, like you said.
Yes, one of the things.
Lila's a very wise individual.
I'm a cynic when it comes. I know you. That Mr. Steeves, nothing personal, it's just that there are half a dozen of them guys. If we want him to be supporting us right now, we got to hope for this government that's putting office right now for long-term government. Because if they're there any longer, they're going to look at us and just by grabbing onto this guy, we're going to be associated with him. And it's as simple as that. And that's why it worked with Mr. Graham and why it worked with Mr. Doherty. We got in a position that it benefited both sides, them and us. Well, it certainly, but it did matter when it
did not have part of it.
No, but I mean by us, if we associate with Mr. Steeves, we're going to be there.
It's got to be nonpartisan. I agree.
Well, I know. That's a rosy little thing to say, but in reality, this is my opinion. Reality, politics.
What we've done though is we have sent this out to all politicians who might be remotely related to this topic.
But they're still going to follow the
I think we need to start speaking their language. I think we need to start speaking their language. We keep saying we need. They keep seeing dollar signs and shutting it down. We need to have somebody crunch the numbers, what this means for autism financially for the government, and what it means if they don't, and show them that this is how much it's going to save you in the long run. And if we don't do something, there's nothing. And what are we going to do at all? If we can't deal with it now, how are we going to deal with it later when it's worse?
Show them what the cost is going to be eventually when this wave goes
Exactly.
over.
We need someone to crunch the actual numbers.
What you could save them by making this ready, this
Yes.
facility ready to
show them the difference so that they can't
Because it is
dispute
gonna be a
the
wait.
numbers.
We know that there's more children with autism right now in the system that are gonna phase through eventually and be adults, and so we need to be ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And
There's
Speak their language, speak savings.
In the St. John area, it's a large home. It deals with not specifically autism, but about everyone there is developmentally delayed. They have, I think, only 6 clients at the moment, it's a small home. They have pretty much one-on-one, as far as the number of people that are there in the daytime. They have 4 or 5 that go to their job. They have different levels of needs, but they're very functional and looking after the house itself. The people that work there are from all over the world. They come in with part of their occupational training therapy, part of their psychology training. It's a wonderful facility. A lot of it's privately funded, but it's a great model. You know, they participate everybody in the daily maintenance of the house and the cleaning and the laundry. They have group meetings. They're out in the community. It's a really good model.
I think there has to be a range of models too, quite honestly, because there's just as there has to be a range of accommodations within the school system, and that's worked as a model in that level.
And that's another thing that's good to bring into the fact that of any kind of facility is the possibility of bringing people in for their educational purposes.
Yeah.
That you're giving that opportunity. And there's another center that I need to get more information on in Wolfville, that students dedicated there on the waiting list to get into this facility to volunteer.
In which facility?
I'm not sure.
Is it in Nova Scotia?
It's in that Wolfville.
I can look into that too. My family's from that area.
Yeah.
And I have a family who's involved with the developmental.
And those are from preschool to young adulthood, I believe, that go there.
Okay.
And the girl that I know that volunteers, she comes back with all this stuff, and she comes to with Matthew. You know, it opens their eyes to a lot of different things too.
And that's probably one of the models that we could have around the province. We still need a center though, a facility to develop the expertise. Like each of the locations around the province is going to need people who are properly trained in understanding in autism and how to interact with autism. That's the fundamental premise of the model that has been developed by Paul McDonald, which many of us, or some of us at least, have embraced. I've embraced it. I don't think for a second we're ever going to have an adult care solution without a facility like that. That's what it took in early intervention and education. And it becomes more difficult in the adult years. I don't mean to sound too pontificating, and I apologize genuinely, I really do. But when you have a child on the autism spectrum at age 3, 4, 5, 6, and let's assume that child is severe at that age, the challenges that you'll deal with at that age will change once they enter adolescence, for example, and adulthood. And if anybody, and I know it sounds a little bit too aggressive to point names at people like Mr. Jody Carr. I understand that. But he's one of the foremost advocates of the community philosophy, solution for everything approach, and that's why I'm calling him out on it. If he wants to debate with me one-on-one, I'd be happy to. What I won't do is allow him to actually try to provide care for my son for 30 minutes. Because I wouldn't want to put my son at that risk. And I wouldn't want to put Mr. Carr at that risk.
So
because it's a challenge to deal with my son's autism. His mom doesn't live in the house. I'm a sole parent for my son because he's an adult severely autistic. And his mom can't handle the various challenges. And that's not a criticism of her. I'm a great big grunt of a guy. So for me, the challenges physically caring for my severely autistic son are much different. And those kind of realities, when your son is 6'2", 220 pounds of muscle, when he has a meltdown, you better believe it's a meltdown. And his mom couldn't deal with that, and that's perfectly understandable.
So how do we get the numbers that we're talking about, right? We talk about 1 in 68, we talk about 1 in 68, but how do you get local New Brunswick numbers? Because there is no, and that, so this is, how do we?
Not just the autism numbers, but the financial numbers of how much it's going to cost to get these services.
Exactly. So how do we, and I think that's what you're saying, so can we sit here today and brainstorm and come up with a way to put that
The
into?
only solution to that problem, which is a very real problem, and it's a good one to bring up, the only solution is to take American figures and break the numbers down according to our population. That's what we've done historically.
I have it here. Basically, it is, this means incidence of autism spectrum disorders ranges from 4,700 to 11,100 individuals in New Brunswick. This also means that services are needed for roughly 3,300 to 7,900, because they're in the range between 22 years and 75 years.
So that's just the older ones as well, which isn't encompassing the majority, which is the other ones.
No, this is adults, we're talking adults.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Well, and that's why I was
Based
thinking,
on the US numbers and the ratio of 1 to 68,000.
So it's probably 10 times that number.
You're looking at here in New Brunswick, anywhere between 3,300 and 7,900.
In Canada as a whole, we haven't developed an understanding of Canada-specific rates for autism. They're not available.
It's in the works. Public Health Agency of Canada is working with each province.
Yeah.
But each province handles things differently. New Brunswick's got social development providing some services, different diagnostic codes. So right now they're working with each province to see if it's possible to collect health information on a national basis.
Yeah.
It's a year and a half out.
That's what we're going forward.
yeah.
And I appreciate you bringing up that information, Darlene. The fact, though, is our federal government has not been very actively involved with autism issues in any meaningful sense.
But if we're talking about collecting statistics.
Yeah, well, they could have been doing it for the last 10 years, is all I'm saying. They haven't, right? And we have to move forward now. That's all I'm getting.
Well,
What
and
we've
if,
developed, what we've relied on are American figures for that reason.
and if we know, like in Fredericton alone, I know when I was talking to Danielle, who runs the center here, at any one time, from the preschool side, if we think to what you were saying in terms of more and more and more growing through the system and becoming adults, at any one time, they have in Fredericton alone over 100 kids receiving, between the ages of 2 and 5, receiving early intervention care. That's a lot of kids. Like if you take that and you multiply. No, and that's just Fredericton. There are 6 centers. There are 5 other centers out there.
We had a member of parliament in Fredericton. His name was Andy Scott. And several members of our Autism Parent Advocacy group met with him for years. And Andy Scott and Peter Stopper were the 2 members of parliament who put together the only a private member's motion which was acceptable to the current federal government to go forward and allude to the need for data as well. But that resulted not from any charitable organizations. It didn't result from the government department. It resulted from parent advocacy and actually originated here in Fredericton as well. It was Mr. Scott and Mr. Stopper pushing for it. That's what got it to that level. If the Canadian government actually does it in a year and a half to the extent, great. I don't want to be negative.
Well, they've been working on it for a year.
Yeah. I'm not trying to be negative, like I said earlier, but the past history hasn't shown that they'll make a meaningful effort. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. There's no past history to suggest that the federal government, as it exists, will do anything meaningful in its result.
Where's Jim Munson?
Sorry?
Jim Munson, Senator Munson, he was the senator for the national.
Yeah, he did that overview of autism issues with a specific reference, obviously, to Canada. And Senator Munson was, I believe, the chair of that committee.
We have a Woodstock from my
Yeah, and he advocated for early treatment, for example. Pay now, pay later was, then I was very, very active advocate. He also appeared at various conferences. And actually, that's quite correct. Senator Munson also came from an organization that was a big conference on autism care that was organized and held in Nova Scotia a number of years ago. And Peter Stopper was there, and Scott was there, and Jim Munson was there. And if you go on I have a blog site, receive advertising revenues, so there's no money in it for me. If you check it out though, you can see a reference to that and a picture of Mr. Munson, Senator Munson, sorry, with Andy Scott and Peter Stopper closing there. And so, yes, Senator Munson has been very active, and I appreciate that.
He actually came all the way in front of me. He actually filed the minister of Woodstock.
Yeah.
He came all the way, not only had our first meeting and opened it up, and meeting on University of Woodstock. We got a lot of press, and then we can communicate and finding it after the whole home.
Maybe he can help in making sure that the federal Department of Health gets the job done.
He is working on it. He does so much behind the scenes.
Yeah.
He was in Moncton. When he was in Moncton, he stopped by the Doherty Resource Center and had coffee. Make sure you let him go.
It's your communication.
I feel
Same
like,
with me, I do occasionally email now.
not with him, but I see his name on a lot of projects.
I think another individual to keep in the loop would be Peter Stopper from Nova Scotia. He's a member of the New Democratic Party from Nova Scotia, an MP who's been very active in autism. I was startled one day because he called me at my office, and I didn't expect to call. I didn't know who he was when he first called, and there was nothing significant about me. He was just contacting people in different provinces who he had been informed were involved with autism advocacy, and that's he was one of the co-sponsors with Andy Scott, and it wouldn't hurt to have him in the loop either and pushing forward on the autism, Canadian autism rates research.
I think you're right, the kind of changes we're talking about are clinician issues. They always have them.
Well,
Health education issues.
they have been because the federal government took that position. We have Medicare, national Medicare legislation. I'm actually a member of the Medicare for Autism Now organization, and we pushed very hard for that. Sean Murphy for PEI, who was a Liberal MP, he actually brought forward a private member's motion to have it included under Medicare as a required condition for treatment using evidence-based treatment. Of course, it didn't go anywhere, but there's no reason it couldn't be done under national Medicare legislation except the different political philosophies. And I'm not trying to attack the current government by doing that, but they didn't want to listen at all. So
The concept of national autism strategy that was spoken, and it's going to be a national strategy, obviously, the feds are going to have to be involved. I don't know where that conversation has gone. I know it's something that Senator Munson has said that we need, but I don't know where it's gone.
well, personally, I don't believe it's been any meaningful results.
Is it possible it qualifies as a human rights complaint that it's the only condition in Canada that has those services available for Medicare?
No, I don't think so, because there was a case called Otten that went through the courts in British Columbia and went to the Supreme Court of Canada. And that was the exact issue. Medicare coverage for autism, and at the trial level and at the BC Court of Appeal level, and it was the unanimous BC Court of Appeal, they ruled that it was discriminatory not to include coverage for treatment for autism. And the Supreme Court of Canada overturned the BC Court of Appeal in a unanimous decision and rejected it. For this, what they did was it's getting a bit legalistic, but what they did was look at a comparative group. So they did a comparative group analysis and said, well, they looked at, I forget which group it was that they felt was comparative to autistic children. They looked at that group and said, well, they don't get that kind of a service or treatment, therefore it's not discriminatory because nobody's getting that kind of treatment. And it may sound very befuddling, but that's the way the Supreme Court of Canada analyzed it. That's my summary of it. I was disappointed as a lawyer and as a father of an autistic child involved.
That's kind of a cop-out though, because you can set up at any condition before services started for it.
Well, the other thing too that came out of that decision was that prior to the Supreme Court of Canada decision in Otten, most provincial governments across Canada dealt with autism as a neurological disorder, as a health care issue, and looking at possible funding for treatments, etc. But when the Otten case was going through the courts in BC, they changed across Canada, literally, and started changing it from health care as a primary department focus for autism to social development or family and community services. And when I offer that interpretation of the history, it's not mine alone. There's a paragraph in the Autism decision of the Supreme Court of Canada that makes a much briefer reference to that fact. But that does point out that the government departments were switching. And that's what happened in New Brunswick. The first announced funding for autism-specific funding in New Brunswick, I believe it was on April 1st, 2003. And I was at the legislature that day, and Minister of Health was at the time was Elder Robichaud. And they announced a certain level of funding under healthcare for autism. But once the autism bandwagon started going, the governments elsewhere in Canada started switching to social development and family community services departments. That's what happened in New Brunswick as well. So we have social development as the primary department responsible for a healthcare issue of autism disorder. And that's, as I say, that was the historical origin of that shift. And there's reference in the Autism decision to that shift. They were trying to avoid the characterization of autism as a healthcare issue to protect themselves in the event the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the parents again. So anyway, we've covered a lot of ground. The initial agenda item was to discuss adult care, and I think we've canvassed a lot. As I say, pardon me? Okay, well, just to get to that, there's one other point I wanted to mention quickly. The Autism Society did review this issue several times over the years, and we did do a survey as well. And we did put two locations, and we did recommend a facility or center, and we put it out to our members at the time for two locations to consider, Moncton or Fredericton, and the result was Fredericton. So I just want to put that out there as well. Developing interest with the Stan Cassidy Center, with the early intervention program, with the UNBC program, and so forth. I have no idea. That was a number of years ago, John. That was our members that were active at the time. And that's also what basically has been pushed by the group that's been working with Paul. I understand that these issues are politically sensitive, as we saw in the recent complex needs issue. Well, the two reasons for Fredericton are that it's a central location. As I say, we have considered Moncton as well as another central location.
But if there's good satellite step down kind of support, then
Around the province.
yes.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
the
that's
idea.
all part of it, but, yeah, but the home base should be Fredericton with our satellites.
And I don't have a problem.
Yeah. But that was the reason for the home base.
So the basic model is what Paul McDonald has commented on in principle in 2010. He's been drafting it since. I've offered that online to anybody who is interested by just sending me an email, and you can have a copy of it. So if anybody wants to review it further, there's no other logical or organized thought that's been put into any alternative to that model at this point in time. But if somebody has a better idea with the expertise to back it, of course, it should be considered. But Paul McDonald is the individual who organized our thinking for the early intervention program. New Brunswick parents didn't go running off with different wild theories about what caused autism. We didn't come up with some of the stranger theories that have come up been advanced for treating autism. We were hardcore focused on early intervention based on evidence-based approach. And it wasn't because we were any better than anybody else or special. We had a very good mentor, and our humble opinion was the biggest reason we were able to maintain that focus. That's Paul McDonald. And it's Paul that has overseen much of the development of this province and has advocated for the network system that we talked about here today. So when we started out, and Rebecca quite properly touched on some other issues and questions, I mentioned that we were going to shift at a certain point from adult care, and the only other final point is we're not talking about a hospital facility just because it's a facility. There's modern alternatives today. We're no longer living in the age of the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest movie. we can deal with new facilities, we can look at new facilities, we can open our minds, do the homework, do the research. I don't want something that's going to hurt my son. I want him to live a life that he can enjoy and receive proper supervision, treatment, care, and security. I've got no reason, personally, to advocate for any less of a model. And we don't have to go to a model like the one we're being sent to now in Restigouche. We can develop a facility alternative. Podway is one example. We can look at any other modern examples that are out there for a decent life for autistic people in this province. So I'm going to leave that now. I'm sorry, Darlene.
I apologize for coming in late, but I wanted to ask, since the motion's been tabled to talk in the legislature on services for adults with autism, is there any plan to do anything to support the politicians to provide a policy or something, like a one-page thing that provides?
Well, they've already got Paul's proposal to start with.
Right, but I understand this was here earlier. We're just before the event, I think we can go have a discussion on the motion on Thursday afternoon. We'll have to change it, of course. But that's funny. And he said, in the interim, he said, he wants stories. He wants personal stories. You know, that would help him, because I said, what do you need from us right now? I said, I need your story. He said, I need to make it real for these people.
Yeah, he did say that.
And I'm recording the go-to meeting, and I can put it up so that you can hear what he said at the beginning as well for you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, people actually got to look at that.
Yeah.
My apologies.
One of the things that I found had an impact when we were looking at intensive early intervention is everywhere the government went, every professional they talked to, whether it was speech, whether it was daycares, they were all saying, we don't have the training and the expertise, we need what the parents are asking for.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've got that level of support in adult services right now.
Well, I don't think, in all honesty, we have any overwhelming support anywhere. That's my humble opinion. I think what we have to do is start hitting hard. And by hitting, I don't mean that in an aggressive, confrontational sense. I just mean we got to get out there. For example, when we were doing early intervention, we stood in front of the legislature. That's what we did to start the process. We also went to a specific facility and stood in front of the facility. On Thursday, there's going to be a debate.
Should we be there on Thursday?
I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
And I posted the link, it was 1999, but we held a conference, we had about 100 professionals there, brought in Dan Cross Neurohealth to talk about the best practices in educating children with autism. And it would be really wonderful, I think, if the psychologists at mental health all have the tools and vocabulary to say specialized services are more effective than generic services without costing them.
I don't know if they've done that kind of thinking or not, apparently. I don't want to wait for it. If it happens, great. I know Paul's involved with community. We spoke with Dr. Tara Kennedy as well at the Stan Castle Center. And I didn't get a sense from talking to them that kind of, like, I'm not criticizing or questioning what you're saying is making perfectly good sense, because it does.
Okay, so that's what I want to know. There's no plans right now for us to take that on.
Well, I think we have to step back a moment and say, well, what can we do as advocates? And we have to learn from what we've done in the past. And what we did in the past was get out in front of the decision makers and bring it to their attention that this is what we need. And we know, I know as a parent what my son needs, and it's not the Restigouche facility, it's not a hospital in St. John or Fredericton. I know that. For the severe end of the spectrum, I know it. And I spend a lot more time on this than they do. Because I live with my son 24/7. I carry on a law practice while providing sole care for him. Not a big deal. I don't need a pat on the back or the head. What I'm saying is I know from that experience what's required. And it's not those kind of options that are there. There's no option here in this province that can do it. And there's others like my son. That's why they end up in the hospital, living on a hospital ward bed. And I've had email on that effect. We know we've got to push for this. What we do is bring in people as we go. That's my humble opinion as to how to do it strategically. We can't sit back and wait for a conference to be held that will give us what we want. My view of conferences, it doesn't work that way. We didn't do that with the early intervention, with all respect. No, the people who,
Co-sponsored it with early intervention.
I'm sure that happened, okay? I'm not questioning that. The advocacy that resulted in the early intervention started when we stood in front of the legislature. When we went public with it.
So how do we then, as a group, how do we unite? And there was a comment online from Pamela. How do we need to unite as a group, as a room, as a community?
We can start this Thursday.
So that, and I think that's it. What's our next step?
We stand in front of the legislature this Thursday.
If I can just add something as from the advocacy point of view, I've been on both ends of it, and it is important, like Rebecca is saying, to be more organized and try to say where are we going and that type of thing.
Yeah.
It would be really great, though, from a politician's point of view as well, to see a really strong advocacy group that has a board of directors, that has a president or a chair or whatever, that has regular meetings and having a meeting once every year or two. We already know is probably not the best way to do it, right? But yeah, we definitely need to get more organized for sure. That's the main.
So if we have like a couple of board meetings, it's going to happen then? I'm being a bit sarcastic, I apologize, but
No,
it's not how we did it before, so I'm just asking.
No, I know, a couple board meetings, you're right, it's definitely not going to be enough.
There's nothing wrong with having the board meetings. All I'm saying is the board meetings don't get it done. What gets it done is a commitment to standing in front of the people that make the decisions. That's my humble opinion.
Right, no, you're right, board meetings don't get it done. The board meetings create organization though, so that the group can say, can speak in one voice. So when we go to the legislature, we're not just a bunch of parents waving signs, we're very organized, very structured in the message that we're trying to send.
Well, that's what you have to be, is
Yeah.
prepared. No, what I'm saying is you have to be prepared that, we shouldn't worry about structure. I've been in this field for a long time as well. I'm going to go back to where I worked in a group home for 25 years. While I'm working in a group home, I can tell you, I was trained as a human service counselor. There was lots of folks in the group homes, adults, that had autism spectrum disorder. Human service counselors know diddly squat about autism. And what I learned very quickly, those group homes are nothing more than custodial care. The quality of life that I would want for any son or daughter, your son or daughter, is not what they should get. There is no quality of life. It's you have staff that are supposedly trained, but haven't got a clue, that think they're trained, haven't a clue what autism is, and they're getting custodial care. These kids that have challenges, with a lot of self-stimulatory behavior, they're jumping up and down, rocking back and forth, get that kid out of my hair, go down to your room. It's just, there's no quality, there's no dignity, there's nothing. So to assume that, everything's hunky-dory, so you just gotta go to that legislature and just bring out as many signs as you possibly can, and as many grandparents, as many brothers and sisters, and say, this is the time we need to initiate the process. It's not gonna happen overnight. You're gonna have to fight for the next 4 or 5 years, but I'll guarantee you, you have a kid that's 12 years old or 10 years old now, they're gonna grow up some quick, and you're gonna say to yourself, 10 years down the road, why didn't I do something? Why didn't I make a stand? I was a very, very, very shy person. And when I started this process, my son was 5 years old. And at that point in time, it's like, I don't want to get involved. This is too traumatizing for me. But if you want to make a difference in your son and daughter's life, you need to get out there and don't worry about all this other crap that goes on.
Yeah.
So I see two things we need to do: signs and get the word out.
Wait for a second on that. Rebecca, I apologize. I'm not criticizing what Nick is suggesting. I know it makes a better image for certain decision makers, and I respect that fact. But the other fact of the matter, though, is we heard those kind of arguments, and we're still hearing them. I get it. I understand the point that they like to use as an excuse to not have to listen to you. I understand that fully. The way we dealt with it, and I know Darlene isn't going to like what I'm saying now, but when the ASMD came to the attention of many advocates, we ignored the corporate structures, we ignored the restrictions on charities advocating, and we lost our charitable status.
But you lost your charitable status for
not filing, but we were also cautioned not to engage in any more advocacy by the Autism Society of Canada to start with.
That's why we formed FACE.
That's why we formed FACE. And what I'm saying, the point is, Caroline, we didn't focus on corporate structures, board meetings, etc. We advocated for the cause we knew we had to advocate for. And that's how it got done.
But I still think that having some organization, having minutes on what community, like you want the province engaged. If you're speaking for parents and stakeholders, it's important to let them know what you're saying, when you're saying it, who you're saying it to, in my opinion.
I'm not saying it hurts, but I'm saying it's not the priority. Advocacy isn't about having organizational meetings and minutes. We didn't present any minutes to get the early intervention that's in place. And we did that. We didn't do it when ASNB was an organized corporate entity. We stepped away from ASNB, and we did it by communicating directly the need, what was required to deal with the issues, and we did it repeatedly. We took cakes to the Minister of Social Development. Pardon me?
I said the case were awesome, but you know what?
We advocated.
I sat on the interdepartmental committee whose report they didn't want to release.
So did
And
I.
that was, what?
Are you talking about the Independent Autism Committee?
The interdepartmental committee where they met under Marcel Walker once a month.
Yeah, I was involved with that also.
Or once a month for 12 months.
Right.
And then, but those were structured meetings. Everybody had a job to do. During the month, we need to compare notes.
Right.
We produced recommendations and plans for.
That's not how we got the services in place that we got.
That's how we got the screening changed from 3.5 to 18 months.
Darlene, with all due respect, the way we got the early intervention program done was to advocate and to do so repeatedly and persistently in front of the politicians' faces.
I don't see how either of those are mutually.
They're not.
Yeah.
They're not.
And I think that there's room for both. I agree with you, Darlene, in the sense of working on a committee. It's like somebody else keeps the minutes, or somebody else keeps the rest of it. You never know when you need them. One more thing, I've been raising my hand and people have been speaking on this one more thing. I think the most powerful tool you have is writing children. I don't have a child with autism. I'm a high school teacher, 25 years, I retired. I had a student that you can completely engage with his family, and began the group in Woodstock because of him, because he's an adult and he can't get any work. Some of you may know Aaron Bauman. He's an incredible young man. I think the biggest resource is sitting next to me. When I listen to Sloan speak about 3 o'clock in the morning waking up, or one of the other members in our group, I have tears in my eyes. I don't have a child, so my empathy is not experiential. My empathy is empathy. And I think the more that people can see that, whether it's studies that I have on television, support and speed, or whether I'm trying to get a group of Sloan and a couple of other people in Woodstock to go into the schools and start speaking to home school meetings and start speaking to teachers and in-service. It's just that awareness and to tell a story, give the narrative of their lives and what they've been through. There's nothing more effective than that. So somebody like Sloan would be, Peter Brown, Aaron Bowman is an amazing resource person. You get to hear enough from some people speak, he's high-functioning autism, he's got the right vocabulary. I mean, so I don't see either of those roles as mutually exclusive. And I'm new to this thing, but I think we need to use the people we have in this room more effectively. Somebody deals with bureaucracy, somebody deals with the organization, and somebody puts their feet on the ground and gets the job done. And I think that changed me. Like we got the group going, when I started doing some of these, and especially the moms that just because I just met you, these largely moms that are in our group that are speaking, blew me away. I have no idea about what you people have been through, what you have been through at 2 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning. I have no idea other than what I hear anecdotally, and it's moved me, and it's moved me, it made me others, and it may move to other people who make the right decisions. Just a couple of comments.
There's not analytically or theoretically or in the abstract, there's no need for those two concepts to be antithetical. But the reality is we start first with the advocacy, and if people want to sit down, do up minutes, organize a corporate structure, fine, but we're not going to adhere to that as a mandate over advancing the interests that we're advocating for. That's priority one.
Can I ask a question? Because I have been a little out of touch, or what this province as a whole has been doing. If I wanted to know what ASMB has done since 2013, how do I find out?
You talk to people. You've been on Facebook and on the web quite often asking me questions, Charlie. I've tried to answer your questions. Didn't I try to answer any question you posed?
We seem to have an email glitch.
Yeah, but we also have Facebook and ASMB. There's no activity or association that's been any more transparent. Let's focus on transparency. There's no question that we have been on the internet using it effectively as our advocacy mechanism from the very beginning. When we started getting our advocacy groups going, there wasn't Facebook. We used Yahoo discussion groups, and we were criticized for that. We were criticized for making us discussions and meetings via Yahoo. We were ahead of our time. The government would send out paper letters a month after the fact, and we'd have moved on. We've used it effectively and transparently.
I remember the Department of Health complimenting how well we organized people through media. They weren't used to using it like that. I've been online since the 80s.
I understand.
So,
Okay,
so speaking, can we
I
get,
think we should move on, stay on the focus, adult services, and let's go at this adult services now.
Is there anybody else here?
And to me, if you're, where you're going to target is go after the politicians, get it up there, that's one
Front page.
front page.
Front page.
Telegraph, every opportunity, parents should be writing in the paper day after day after day after day. There's some, that we need a model in this problem. We need it. The same thing is with when it happened years ago for the kids that were under 5, it only happened because you were out there front and center every day in some paper in this province. With the media, and you were on television, you took every opportunity, and that's the only way you're going to get things done. I'll give you an example in the mayor's sheet last week. We got a new nursing home, you guys didn't. You know why? Because in 2006, Dr. Gerard Lomache, who he's the most incredible person you ever want to see or meet, he took it upon himself to say, okay, membership needs a new nursing home. We have a petition. There was 11,000 names that was on that petition. Went to the legislature, go to Dr. Lomache. Yeah, you need a nursing home. Did anything happen? Absolutely not. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, we had a forum in one of the biggest buildings in Miramichi, and which held 1,000 people. Couldn't get any more people in. There's people, probably 300 or 400 more people waiting outside to get in. I have to be lucky one to get in there. There were 3 or 4 politicians that were invited on the river. The noise was made. He challenged those people, if you don't do this, you're representing Miramichi, then cross over. The scare tactic, because he has, Dr. Lomache had so much credibility in the Miramichi community that was sufficient enough to scare the government. Within a week, it was announced, Miramichi is getting a new facility.
Pressure.
You have to go out there and fight, and
That's the way it works.
that's the way it works.
I just want to make sure some folks at the back there get a chance to speak.
We just wanted to know what time it is. You can report to be on the front of the legislature, but also in the gallery.
Yeah?
4:30?
I think we have to be very thankful about it.
Yeah, Australia doesn't have a real strict schedule. It kind of depends on how the previous items might go that day.
But that's an excellent question, and I think one way to answer it in a logistics sense is to get there before 4:30 and protest on the lawn in front of the legislature. And as it becomes apparent that they're going to be going in to address the motion, then we can move inside and hopefully get seats in the legislature. Sorry, there's just one more. I apologize for that. Valerie?
No, it's the same question.
Okay.
So I was going to say, based on this, it sounds like, we obviously need to be there Thursday. So there's, to organize ourselves to talk about that, we need to discuss and think how we get the word out there, how we get more people down. There was a talk about signs. Is there, maybe some of us get together if we can one night this week and help make signs so that there are more signs available. There was also talk about letter writing, like how do we, and I think that's maybe a little bit of what Darlene's point was, there's 4 or 5 things. There was also, stories and awareness and financials and getting some of those numbers so that when the motion is talked about and debated, that there's all that there. So how do we divide and conquer kind of those 5 things?
Well, I don't think we divide for the purpose of the legislature. I think we all go.
Well, yes, no, so I mean, like, get the word out.
I'm just starting with one at a time. Your question is a good question. I'm not trying to shift the side at all. I want to address it. I think we all go. Everybody in this room and everybody if you can get them to come to the legislature Thursday, that's how we do it. That's how we get it done. I'm not saying we can't have, minutes kept and all that good stuff. As a lawyer, I'm supposed to be sensitive to those things, but I disregard them for the most part as an advocate, because that's not how it's going to get done. That's all. You can still do it. But we have to do the advocacy. That's the priority.
I guess what I was meaning is like, is there one person or a team of people who will focus on how the word has gotten out there? Is there one team or group of people who will focus on making sure there are signs? Is there one who will take on getting a bunch of stories and finding out who will speak?
We made up our own signs, but if somebody wants to volunteer to make signs available for other people, that's fine. Anybody want to volunteer?
Well, I would if anybody wants to do stuff with me, I will do it.
We can volunteer his class.
Yeah.
As a project.
There might be sensitivities to that. Sorry, is it Sloan, is it? Sloan High.
People that maybe don't have time to have much time, because I do find sometimes, especially when I'm advocating and stuff, that they kind of look at it like crazy moms, crazy dads, what I mean? But it's hard, it's hard to engage them, right? You want to engage people who want to support in your community and everything like that, right? So another thing that I do find that kind of works, the autism. We know that you're going to the restaurant and there can be families there, and they may not think about it because that's not their life, but they have a high chance it is going to be their life. If it's not your child, it's your grandchild, or it's going to be somebody that they know. And it's showing them these stories and saying, listen, this may not be your life right now, but screw it, or screw your kid's life. So if you don't help somebody in the family that's trying to like finding ways to find others who are not just
I feel like we're only friends, but that's the grassroots right there. We put ourselves out there, we put our other kids out there, we put our children out there.
Anybody you can get.
That's important to get is from your own community. We have to have policy, I don't know, in my area,
The most important thing about the protests at the legislature, and it's a protest, the most important thing is to stay focused on the topic at hand. The topic at hand is adult care. That's what the motion is about, and that's the topic at hand. It's not that doesn't mean we're disregarding early intervention where we worked for years. And those of us who were involved with it and actively fought for it, our kids didn't benefit from the early intervention. And that's not a, wow, aren't we wonderful comment? It's not. We knew that was the right thing to do. We also knew practically that's the only way to get anything started was with the early intervention. That's where the most compelling evidence was. That's where the most public responsiveness is always going to be is with young kids. There were a lot of practical reasons. There was also, it was the morally correct thing to do, in my humble opinion. Even if it didn't help our kids, it was the right thing to do. And so we're not going to ignore that, but we've got a certain amount of progress. We've got less progress in education, and we know that's far from being complete. Well, we've got zero progress in adult care. That's the subject of the motion on Thursday, and all the signs should reflect that focus. This is about adult autism care, and we need it. We've needed it for a long time. We've been sending people out of the province. We've been sending people out of the country. We've been sending people to the very hospitals. But people say, well, the community can take care of it. It can't. The evidence has proven conclusively that repeating community cliches doesn't help autistic adults have a life. It doesn't help. We have to have the facility with the group homes, or whatever term you want to use for the specialized care homes in Moncton, St. John, Campbellton, Bathurst, Miramichi, Woodstock, I know there's a lot of other communities in New Brunswick, but that's what we've got to focus on. And if we're not focused, we won't get anything done. And we have to make clear why we're there. That's all. And we have to be civilized and conduct ourselves within the rules. The first time we held a protest at the legislature, I'm a lawyer. I called over to the Franklin City Police. I asked them what we should do and shouldn't do with respect to protest activity and let them know we'd be there. I would plan to do the same thing. I actually have union activities which involve me with the various police associations. They're good people to have involved as doing their jobs. One of them is to provide us with information about how to conduct ourselves on the grounds of the legislature properly. And that's what I would recommend that we do again. We don't want to go there and be one of the groups that ends up getting a charge of any type of criminal charge. We want to conduct ourselves properly. Right.
No, the elder, they have to just sit and listen.
Another thing, Harold, that we have to mention too is like, I mean, starting a process like this, it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, if this, we accomplish this within the next 5 years, I say kudos to us.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the reality is it's going to take that long to get there. I would say, no, yeah.
And Mr. Steeves made a good point when he was here. This probably, even the motion for debate probably won't end on Thursday.
Yeah.
So it'll carry over to the start of the next legislative session in the fall. Great. That's great. We've got bookends here to work on and between with respect to our issue. And I know that the big issue they'll throw at everybody anywhere is we're in terrible shape financially, and I understand that. But if we're looking at it long term, what better time to advocate for something than we can be the audacious ones asking to have our issues addressed? We're not saying don't take away the adult autism care, don't cut it back, because it's not there. So we're dealing with a request for something. And we're going to be audacious about it. Polite, courteous, civil, all those things we're supposed to be. We're parents setting models to be models for our kids and so forth. So we always want to be polite and civilized and courteous. But we want to be forefront. We want to be very direct in our message and focus. Focus, focus, focus. Because that's how we got it done.
And I think one of the more important things too is the timing in all this too, because I mean it's going to be another 4 years or 3 years before another election, so you have time to work on this because that's exactly what we did before. We worked on both parties at the same time, getting all the information and pitting one against the other, so to speak. And remember, on those 2 occasions when it was announced that the early intervention was coming, that came during an election campaign.
Yeah.
When the announcement came from the pledge from Mr. Lawrence, and that was Sean Graham for trained EAs, that came out during the election campaign. So we have to figure out what we're going to be doing by the end of the 3rd year, in another 3 years, because that's really should be the highlight to get there.
One of the other things that I am contemplating, and I'm a lawyer and I've done human rights complaints, both for my own son and for some other people on other issues. And I know that our human rights process in this province is weak by any measure. And when you deal with the Human Rights Commission, the mediator, and the mediation process, they will tell you that. They will be quite frank with you and honest with you about that. And when I say we're weak, it's because we're poor criminals and they don't have a lot of resources. It's not because they're bad people. It's because we do lack resources. But a Human Rights Commission complaint is something I'm still considering for adult autism care. And the reason is this. We have health care, purely health care approach for autism in this province in one area. And that's up to the age of 16 at the Stan Cassidy Center. That's under the health department. That's organized and set up on the grounds of the Chalmers. Why does it stop at age 16? What legitimate rationale is there to cut off treatment for people with a disorder at the age of 16 when you know they need, and I'm not saying everybody has a disorder per se, but that's the technical term. There's also some very bright people who call that autistic, and I understand and respect that 100%. I know some of them, and I appreciate some of them very much. But the reality is it's a healthcare service that's provided up to the age of 16, and with specific requests from the director, Dr. Kennedy, there can be extensions of that to an older age of 17 or 18. On what basis do we stop treating people at a specific chronological age? Because the research, and the May Institute is one that I can point to off the top of my head, the research is that adults also benefit from the same kind of treatment, period. Maybe not to the same level, and I quite agree with what Don said. Everybody in society, all humans, tend to absorb more in the 2 to 5 range, for sure, including on the people with an autism condition. But you still have the ability to learn and receive the benefit of treatment as you age. And I sure hope so anyway, because I'm not getting any younger. But there are studies, and the May Institute is a very, very credible, respected institute, which has reviewed those just very recently and point to that very principle. So that's another issue. I'm sorry to detract from the strategic approach and the advocacy approach, because it's something I forgot to mention when we got onto the various issues. There's no reason to cut it off at age 16. And by all means, if somebody asks you, you can ask them that question. On what reason do we have to cut off autism treatment at age 16? Why don't we carry through into adulthood? There's no valid, legitimate, moral reason. I talked before about starting early intervention as a moral priority, because it's the kids. You start with the kids. It doesn't mean you exclude the adults. That's a morally bankrupt philosophy. I'm always humble. In my humble opinion, that's a morally bankrupt philosophy. Anyway, that's a very important point. I just want you to keep in mind when you're being asked questions, if you are, and if you wish to discuss it with people questioning you. We know we need the autism care for adults. We know it because we've spent money and sent them to different places, including outside the country. The proof, the evidence is in front of us. We know we can develop the treatment programs, the services to do it. We've done it to a level unparalleled in Canada. And we've seen people move here from Toronto to the London area for that reason. I've also received questions by email for the same point, and I discouraged them because the kids were too old under the system. But there's no question that we're seen as a model for that development. And we've developed it to some extent in the school system. Let's get something done in adult care and treatment. Let's go with the model that Paul McDonald, our mentor, for so much of what we actually have. We don't have to bring somebody in from California or Toronto. We've already had somebody lead us to one of the best models in Canada already. And he's developed this satellite program that we've been enhancing further. We also have a very, very capable parent advocate named Don Bowie, who has gotten people like me to stand up and start doing something. I've told this story many times, but I just get such a kick out of it. Very few people have talked to me in a certain way, pointing their finger in my face and telling me to get something done, which is what Don Bowie did many years ago. And we have to do that. We have to get up and start actively advocating.
Question for you, because I know we had so many different streams going early in my son was 4 when we got the first minister of health. He was 10 when the fund was approved. He was 12 by the time the centers were really running.
Yep.
But I guess a part of it was education kind of based. Now, 2 years ago when we as Autism Canada brought in the national conference to review and the Paul had suggested we get Peter Gerhardt, who wasn't available to be speaking at the Geneva Center. You could be away that much. Wouldn't it be awesome to start working with groups like people who provide generic generic care to adults with special needs, and going, what if we did a conference with Peter Gerhardt here?
Does Autism Canada fund that? Will they bring Peter Gerhardt in?
we could charge a fee and as ASAP and do it
Yeah, but
independently.
you're mentioning Autism Canada, I'm just asking you.
Oh, I mentioned it just because when that conference came, we asked Paul and one of the people, we asked who would be the best speakers to come in, and we gave away tickets to people to start the conversation going. There were 4 presentations on adult services, but we didn't get Peter Gerhardt, and it's 2 years later. Wouldn't it be great to have him come in?
Sure, but we don't want to wait till that day. That's all I'm saying.
No, but I guess what I'm asking is, we're talking a 10-year potential time frame.
Right.
Right, so do we want to be part of having people who are already in this field going, you know what, we're not at it, we're not following best practice, we're trying to do this, we need specialized training, we need a specialized system.
There's no question that we want to have best practice. That's why we did it earlier intervention school years,
Do
right?
you see a role for ASMB in doing things like organizing conferences around?
Not really, no.
That's what
And I'll elaborate further what I mean. The point you're making, Paul has made directly to us as well, including during our discussion at Dr. Kennedy's office within the last 2 weeks. And we don't, by any means, argue against bringing somebody like that in to assist. But the priority has to be to push first, get things moving first.
You
That's all.
don't see doing all of those things at once.
You can't do them all at once.
We did it all at once at one time.
For what?
For early intervention.
That's not how early intervention got done, with all respect, Arlene. It didn't happen in that fashion. It didn't happen that way. We didn't sit down and have a board meeting and conduct and take minutes and so on. We stood in front of the legislature. We communicated via Yahoo groups. I know by memory that one of our first issues was the big issue, should we go during the week or should we go on Saturday? And nobody could make up their mind. And I personally said, I'm going on Saturday because people can't be expected to manage their situations with their kids during the school week. We had 3 protests in the space of 5 weeks. One 2 weeks later and one 2 weeks after that. That's how we got going. And that's how we have to get going. There's nothing wrong at all with bringing somebody in at some point if you can get it done. We don't wait till that day in the future. We actively advocate now. And when you can bring them in, bring them in. And if your contacts at Autism Canada want to help us in that regard to bring them in, that would be wonderful.
No, I'm just asking what you saw at ASMB was. Do you believe that the standing in front of the legislature was the single most important thing?
No, I don't. I think it was one of the things that we did in advocating. And that's those of us that didn't know that.
What's the other thing?
What are the other things?
Other things that brought it through. Standing in front of the legislature, you take one.
Right.
What's the other one?
The other was media. Media, we used the papers was huge. There was the Telegraph, there was the American Leader, there was all the Times. You know, yourself, you wrote different pieces in yourself. I remember reading some of your articles.
We had he was a retired deputy minister of finance who came to a meeting we had in Moncton. And we talked about how many matters does it take to make an impact, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000? And he said, really, 3 embarrassing questions in front of the microphone will stop 1,000 letters.
Well, in any event, there's nothing wrong with bringing in other people, Darlene. Nothing at
But
all.
you prefer it not be done through ASMB. Maybe that's something to say.
Well, no, hold on for a second, please, because you're putting words in my mouth.
Every flipping time we get together, there is this argument about ASMB. As far as I'm concerned, there is no ASMB right now. It's not there. There's a group, a small group of people who are using the name of ASMB. Harold, I'm not going to go there with you. This is just ridiculous, and it counteracts everything we're here for.
What are we doing wrong here?
You're saying
not because of this, but we have to go. I would love to be part of an organization that sends out. We felt
need it.
isolated up in.
Okay, let's make a solution then. Let's stop advocating now.
Whether it's ASMD and I'm just, we'd love to be able to be in contact with an organization that says, this is going on here, this is going on here, this is what you need. Do you want to be part of this? And those who are active on the feet, on the ground, fighting for advocacy, I'd like to be part of that also.
Would you like to advocate, Richard?
Pardon me?
Would you like to advocate?
Yeah.
Well, then let's do them both, as you suggested.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a fundraiser tonight.
Just to appreciate your appreciation.
Well, we've got good stuff. We've got the business community supporting us. We've got West Florida who runs the fund that gives us to us free. Kathy Hutchband is Kathy's another one of our members. We've got the car dealerships at Tim Hortons that have given us money. So we're here, but we'd like to be part of the bigger, that's why we're here today. We'd like to be part of the bigger movement. And I love advocating. I love a good fight, especially when I know I'm right. And I'll only take the fights on when I know I'm right.
Can I make a point? I don't care about the fight. What I care about are the results.
Yeah.
Okay? And for me, it's not about some abstract theory of whether or not we want to join an organization. This whole debate about AS and B is irrelevant to what we're here for today. What we're here for today is to advocate for adult autism care services. That's why Mr. Steeves was there. I'm sorry it got derailed, but that's what has happened. And to answer Karen's question, the people who were the standing committee, the council for AS and B, are still sitting in this room. Darlene said, well, we didn't file that annual return. We didn't. We also didn't have charitable status. We didn't. We focused on getting things done. You want to reincorporate? You can go do it in 2 days.
Earl, I told you, I'm not going there with you.
I didn't invite you to. What we're here for today is to discuss advocacy strategies.
I'm in here. We gotta go though.
You're welcome.
Maybe, Harold, could we maybe take that step back then and answer that distinction about, because I guess there's been a lot of talk about Autism Society Canada, Autism Society New Brunswick. So maybe do you want to, because you explained it really well to me when we met at the walk. So maybe that's what you want to do, is sort of what you're here for today, what your role is, what you envision for this group, and how that differs from what ASNB was. And, maybe there's a place for both.
ASNB was an organization at one time, maintained its annual returns and kept its charitable status and didn't get anything done. And that's a fact. And by getting anything done, it didn't get done. I'm not asking you to come with me. I was one of the ones who advocated for stuff.
Listen, when my son was diagnosed, my parents started ASNB in this province. You cannot stand up there and tell me that they did not, because I know what they did.
That's not what I said.
You said ASNB did nothing.
I said they didn't get anything done.
They didn't get anything done. Well, tell me what communicating to a parent about what they're going through is not getting anything done.
I stand corrected. They got that done. I stand corrected.
You just,
I said I accept your correction.
you do possess that vision. And I'm sorry, my vision is that we need some sort of group that is going to help people get through. And it needs to be organized. I'm not saying that we don't advocate, but what I'm hearing from you is that this doesn't matter, all that matters. Well, that's what I'm hearing.
First of all, I didn't create the argument that's going on with this meeting, okay? What I said, and I agree, the focus of this meeting was for advocacy. There's no question about that. And that was put out in an agenda that was posted on the ASNB website. We have Lila Barrett sitting here, who was one of the last. Is that okay? Lila was an active ASNB president. I was an ASNB president for a time. I chose not to be when people decided not to have it. And I understand that tension's always been there. If people want to have an organization as a priority, they're entitled to do that. I respect that. This meeting was originally scheduled to deal with advocacy issues.
Yes.
Okay, and at the back end to deal with organization.
Right.
And there's no question that if people want to have ASNB, they're free to do that. Darlene, who is a member of Autism Canada, can also become and organize ASNB. And I can start a new organization. I can call it Autism Advocacy New Brunswick. And we can focus on getting things done.
Well,
We have meetings.
I'm gonna make a statement right now that exactly what you just said. I'm gonna say that we form a new group, and it's not labeled ASNB,
Right.
and whatever we want to call it, we can call it an advocacy group for persons, for adult care, whatever you want to call it. The important thing is to get it done.
Yeah.
So what we have to do, we have to reach those parents. parents, we can't sympathize with each and every parent. What we need to do is get the work done. I've got problems, you've got problems, you've got problems, you've got problems. That's too big of an agenda for anybody to take on.
Can I just say that as I look around the room, there are some new faces, there are some faces who've been coming over several years. All are the same faces.
Yep.
And for me personally, would I like to be involved in an organized group? Yes. Is that going to happen? I got burned out 10 years ago. Being involved in an organized group. What worked for us was advocacy. So if that needs to be a separate thing, then so be it. But the main thing is that we should be united as parents. However you want to call yourselves, what gets the work done is the parents. And I'm seeing the same faces that I saw
We're
here.
not united.
That's fair.
We're not
Well,
united.
okay. but
We're not,
as a
yeah.
group of
That's fair.
parents, however you want to
That's
divide
quite
it.
fair. And I think what we can do is, Lyle, you talked about what I had talked about, which is starting a new organization. I'm going to call it, for discussion purposes, for those who want to advocate, I'm going to call it Autism Advocacy New Brunswick, and I'll incorporate it.
That's fine.
And if people need my email address, they can contact me. If other people want to go forward with Autism Society New Brunswick, that's fair. And do that by all means with your priorities.
If there were two groups like this, could they not work together? Because I understand, well, and here's the thing, I understand in terms of the advocacy group and the fact that if it was with Autism Society New Brunswick, you weren't allowed to advocate to a certain extent, and that there were, a bunch of other things. And so I understand why there is a need to form the group that you're forming and have it be separate. But could there not be two groups that coexist and do similar and different things? Because there is a need for and other things for other families. So families who are newly diagnosed, to help connect them with centers, to bring in presentations. I know one of the other members, I'm guessing Melba's here today, but I know that there was some other families who wanted to come and they wanted to do a presentation on service dogs and how you go about doing that. So couldn't an organization like ASNB help from all of that kind of thing and work with the advocacy group to promote what you are doing from an advocacy standpoint?
Possibly, but I can't speak.
Couldn't we be cohesive and work together?
Possibly.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, when I was president of ASNB quite some time ago, I logged in the number of phone calls I got from parents throughout the province. And when you're an ASNB member, or if you're on the board, there's no financial gain for that. Nobody got paid. I took 500 phone calls that year, long distance phone calls from across the province. But it's too big of a job. It really is. I don't have, how can you give up, on the average, it was an hour per phone call. Can you give that time up if you were on that board?
No, I'm not saying me personally. I'm just saying,
That's what you're asking. That's what happens.
Yeah, but if you were organized, you have to look at the people that are here. You're all actually quite older than all of us. And in our generation, having something slightly more organized and having a plan to direct.
You know what? I think that's wonderful. I think that's wonderful.
No, I get what you're saying.
I've been there.
And I've been pretty quiet this whole time, kind of listening to everything. But the government, you're asking them for something enormous. I understand that the early intervention was awesome. We took advantage of it. But the first thing they tell you is, our goal here is to make your child indistinguishable from their peers. Well, that's bullshit. That's not going to happen. But if they're
It can happen.
It can happen. It doesn't fully happen. And that shouldn't be the thing. But my point is that if that's what they're telling the government, that if these kids go through this, then they're not going to be a burden when they're older because they're going to be indistinguishable from their peers. Well, they think that their job is done. So you asking for this huge thing when they're saying, wow, we have a community feel, we have the early on intervention.
You know what? I think we really need to go in the two directions.
I agree.
We need to go.
I agree.
We've got one thing on our mind right now, just as we did 10 years ago for your son, your daughter. Didn't happen with my child.
I've
But
already-
You have a voice just like me.
we fought for you. And we fought for your kids, we fought for your kids in the school system.
And I understand that,
Well-
and we would like to continue fighting alongside you. But you're asking for something ginormous, and the government's not just gonna say like, well, these parents are asking for something that we're gonna have to pay billions out of pocket for. They wanna know what they're gonna get in return. Like, they're not gonna just do
What
something
happens,
for
what
nothing.
happens, you take these small steps, and then you end up in the front page.
But if you're more organized, then maybe you can make a bigger step right away.
No, when you take these
Excuse
steps.
me, I'm going to interrupt though, if I may, because we have somebody up here. Sorry, have we talked about like estate planning and so forth? Yeah, and trustees, et cetera. I have a 19-year-old son and I'm his trustee, and I understand what you're talking about. We didn't talk about that today, no. This wasn't the focus today. We set out an agenda of what we were doing. That wasn't part of it.
But that's part of adult services too. Like, wouldn't it be great to have an organization that sees its role?
Your point is taken, Darlene.
To collaborate. There are going to be legal experts on autism in each.
Darlene, you can take the floor.